Today's lesson is on economics, and the TEKS for the lesson are 1. Economics. The student understands the concept of scarcity. The student is expected to explain why scarcity is a basic economic problem, and B. Describe how societies answer the basic economic questions. The questions to ask yourself during the lesson are: what is the fundamental economic problem? And what are the 3 basic economic questions every society must decide on? So, economics. Economics is, economists think that everyone should study economics more because it helps us understand the world around us. Part of economics is the fundamental economic problem. The fundamental economic problem is how people always want more things and they're never satisfied. The fundamental economic problem is scarcity. Scarcity is when people have scarcity is when society cannot produce all the things that society wants and needs. Economics. Economics is the condition of, economics is the study of how society tries to solve unlimited, seemingly competing wants and unlimited wants. Needs and wants. A need is a basic requirement for survival. So, examples of that would be food, clothing, and shelter. Yes, you have a question? The question is economics a part of scarcity, or is scarcity a part of economics? The answer is scarcity is a part of economics. Remember, economics is the study of how people try to solve seemingly competing and unlimited wants. After a need, there's also a want. So if a person has a need for food, shelter, or clothing, a want is a way of expressing that need. So a person who needs clothes could go to the store and buy clothes. Yes, you have a question? The student's question is, what is an example of another want? Another want would be if someone is hungry, they could go to a restaurant and buy a pizza. The next concept is there is no such thing as a free lunch. Economists talk about there is no such thing as a free lunch. And what that means is that there is always a price to what society uses. So even though sometimes things might seem free, there's always a cost to someone. So an example of that would be with reduced price lunches for students. Even though they might seem free, someone else had to pay for them, like taxpayers. Someone had to pay the farmer to produce the food. Someone had to pay the truck driver for delivering the food. Yes, that student has a question. His question is, what is another example of there is no such thing as a free lunch? Another example would be like with a coupon. If someone received a coupon and they used it at a restaurant or a store, even though it seems like you're saving money, it still costs someone else money to produce the coupon. Three basic questions. Economists talk about how there's 3 basic economic questions that every society must decide on. The first question is what to produce. So what to produce means that society has to decide how it's going to use its resources to produce things. So its resources can go to clothing, food, or housing. The next economic question is how to produce. So The next economic question is how to produce. A society has to decide how it's going to produce things. So it can use things like workers and equipment. If a society has more workers, it might want to use more workers than it uses equipment. So things like tractors or construction equipment, they probably wouldn't have to use as much if there were a lot of workers in an area. After a society decides what to produce and how to produce it, it has to decide for whom to produce things for. So if a society is building housing, it has to decide where that housing is going to go, or who they're building it for. So if a society is building housing, they can give it to a certain group of people who work, or maybe someone who needs low-income housing. Okay, so now we're going to do the learning activity. For the learning activity, you guys are going to make a drawing using the different concepts that we talked about today. You need to use at least 6 concepts. And I'm going to model a drawing for you guys so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so if you pretend this is a dry erase board for the students. Okay, I'm going to draw the piece of paper first. So this is a piece of paper that you guys are going to draw the drawing on. So what is an idea you could use for, what is a drawing that you could make for what to produce? Maybe if a society is hungry, they could use food. What could they use? Yes, a field. They could harvest things from a field, like farmers. So okay, so there's a field to produce crops. It could be things like any type of vegetables. Okay, so what is the next thing that a society has? What is another thing that a society has to use? How to produce. Yes, and what do they use to produce things? Yes, they use workers and equipment. So they could use. You could draw a worker. Okay, so there would be a worker. You could draw in the picture, and maybe you could draw a tractor as well. So if a society has more workers in its area than equipment, which one would it use? Yes, it would use more equipment. It would use more workers. Okay, so that's already 2 concepts. We would only need 4 more. So we could do things like scarcity. Maybe if someone was hungry, you could draw them with their hands on their stomach. Okay. So there would be someone who has their hands on their stomach because they're hungry, and that's an example of scarcity. And then maybe for economics, since we know that economics is the study of how people try to solve seemingly unlimited and competing wants, we could draw an economics textbook. because that's the study of how they solve scarcity. So it would look kind of like that. That's an economics textbook. That's how people try to solve seemingly unlimited and competing wants. And then maybe for whom to produce, you could put for whom to produce, you could put a map of a city. So if we draw Laredo, you could say maybe like East Laredo. We could put a $sign there, and that's for whom to produce, because that's who needs the most. That's who might need food. Maybe that's where it's in demand. And then for the sixth concept, if I want to do there is no such thing as a free lunch, I could do maybe someone who's using food stamps because someone had to pay for the food stamps, like a taxpayer. Alright, so there would be a citizen with a food stamps card in his hand or her hand, and how is that an example of there is no such thing as a free lunch? Yes, it's because someone had to pay for the food stamps, even though it seems free. Okay, so now you can start the learning activity.